All right, let's continue on with this kind of winging it study here. Not too much of a deep dive, but just kind of more of an overview. Here we are, Revelation 17, and I'm going to do 18 because these two are connected. Now, the time frame of this, if we're to go linearly, seems to be after the seventh vial, right? At the very end. But I'm not too sure with that. I mean, the start of it makes it seem as that because it says here, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials. And it says had, so this is after he had poured them out, right? But then it tells us some information that seems to be preceding. But we'll go over it as we go through it here. It says here, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations of filthiness of her fornication. Upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Interesting here is that it talks about the blood of the saints and then the martyrs of Jesus, kind of making a bit of a separation. Maybe like saints referring to the Jews and these referring to Christians. Could be. Very easily can be taken that way. A lot of people take this to be the Catholic Church because you have, I think it's the cardinals that wear scarlet, and then you have the bishops in purple. And of course, the Catholic Church is full of the gold and precious stones and pearls and that cup, right? Claiming it's the blood of Jesus that they all are drinking when it's wine. And they send to make them drunk, right? And it says that she's the mother of harlots. And supposedly all the other churches and denominations come from the Catholic Church, right? They try to say that the Orthodox is branched from them. The Orthodox say that the Catholic Church branched from them. But let's just go with the Catholic Church had the Orthodox branch from them, and then you got all these other Protestant denominations that branched off, and they're all basically mini Catholic churches in that they set up the same kind of hierarchy system, and that you need them to interpret the Bible. That's, for the most part, that's how it is, right? So you got the harlot, and is the mother of harlots. But the church is gone. Right? This doesn't mean this is not the harlot. You see, when we were reading in Revelation chapter 2 and 3 about the Jews who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, they are the harlot. And they ended up mixing with Christianity to form Catholicism. Catholicism is just an extended version of the Jewish Levitical priesthood imposed onto Christianity, mixing in with all its other pagan beliefs of the Roman Empire at the time. Just kind of fusing them together. That's why they're called the Catholic Church. Catholic means universal. And they try to say that to mean like it's the universal church. You know, it's God's one church, but it's universal as in it brings in everybody. That's why you see the ecumenical movement with the Pope is bringing in witch doctors and the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Muslims and saying that the Muslims worship the same God as the Catholics do, but that's obviously not true because the Muslims uh, don't believe God has a son and that Jesus died for their sins, and they even call Allah the great deceiver. So that's obviously not true. And the Pope saying that the Quran is just like the Bible, it's just like, what? Right? And even Catholics are waking up to the BS of the head of their church, and they're becoming Protestants even though they still call themselves Catholics, and they protest against the Pope, right? So they could end up being martyrs during this time because of such things. God willing, they're saved one way or another. But yeah, we see that this woman is riding upon the seven-headed beast. That's another thing to point out here. And it's interesting here because of he's taken out into the wilderness to see this. So I wonder if this is a reference to the Jews who have to leave Jerusalem because of what's going on, and they're taken into the wilderness on the wings of an eagle, and from there they're protected and they have a vantage point to see this seven-headed beast and the harlot that's sitting upon it. Maybe. Last thing before I move on is you can also see a connection with the Catholic Church in Israel. They have a huge influence there and a lot of control there that they probably shouldn't have. So there's definitely a mix there where you can see Israel and the Catholic Church mixed. There's also that church that's, I don't even know if it's opened already. We're supposed to open this year in Dubai, the Abrahamic Family House, which is the mixture of Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism. And saying, trying to unite the religions to one. Now that is the wine of her fornication right there, right? Trying to get all the kings of the earth drunk off of that, right? They have contradicting views and beliefs, but they're just going to mix them together anyway. It goes on to say here, verse 7, And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So this might be a reference to when it's actually established. Would be about, go back here to 6, and what is it at? Maybe it's the trumpet I'm looking at. Yeah, the trumpet, the 5th trumpet. And I can't remember where the trumpets are. Yeah, 5th trumpet, and the bottomless pit is opened. So we got a reference to that. Maybe that's when this beast is formed, which we read about in Revelation 13. And it says, it ascends out of the bottomless pit and goeth into perdition. This perdition is interesting because we are told about the son of perdition. And that's only referred to one person, Judas. So a Jewish fella who's supposed to be close to Jesus who betrays him. A depiction of Lucifer, of Satan, right? And some people think that because Judas went to his own place, as it says in Acts 1 and 2, I think it's just chapter 1 mentioning it, that he is the one that comes out of the bottomless pit, and it's when he's assassinated that the devil possesses him, just like he possessed him in the time of Jesus at the first advent. Very interesting look at it, right? And it's interesting that it's John who's writing this here about it going into perdition, and he's the only one that calls Judas the son of perdition. And on top of that, I believe people like Hal Lindsey were saying that John wrote his gospel after he wrote Revelation, and that's why he had a new understanding of his walk with Jesus, and his gospel is vastly different from the other three gospels because he got this revelation. Then he wrote the gospel looking back in hindsight with his walk with Jesus. But let's continue on here. It says, "And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is." You see, this is interesting, because there's some people who would say this is the Roman Empire, because John is saying it was, it is not, and yet is. So from the point of view that he's at right now, where he's in the day of the Lord, the Roman Empire was, but it's not. But yet here it is, it's back. But then people take it where it's the son of perdition, is Judas, who was, and at this time he is not. Yet here he is, right? And then I was thinking, well, Judas could also represent the nation of Israel, its leadership, because he sold Jesus to them to be judged and put to death. And you get the same thing where Israel was, but it was destroyed in 70 AD, and John is writing this after Israel is destroyed, yet it still is. Something to think about there. That could have multiple applications. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. I guess before, one more thing is that, like a lot of people say, is that the kingdom and the king are intertwined. And as you can see, Judas and Israel of the time were intertwined. And they are using that star of Rephaim that they call the Star of David, but there is no Star of David. It's the Star of Rephaim that you can read in Amos 5, that in Acts chapter 7, when Stephen actually rebukes the Jews, he calls them out for having that star to their God. It's a six-pointed star, as Rephaim it refers to Saturn, who has the hexagon at one of their poles, of the North Pole, South Pole of that planet there. And that star is a six-pointed star that has the hexagon in the center of it. That gets you thinking. But anyway, verse 9 here says, "And here's the mind that which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains." Again, mountains can be obviously literal mountains, but it could be also a nation, a kingdom, on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other is yet to come, and when he come, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Now this one I've had fun with, but I'm not quite sure how to really put this together. Because it says it's 7 heads, right? 7 kings. So that's why I would refer to the 7 mountains as 7 nations, and they have their 7 kings, right? And he's saying, from his point of view, 5 of them have fallen, 1 is, and the other is yet to come. And when he comes, it's for a short space. And then the beast that was, is not, and he is the 8th, and is of the 7, right? So we have an 8th one that comes up later, but is of one of the 7 that was, is not, yet is, right? So I was like, okay, who are these? So I was taking a look at this, and I was having trouble putting it together until I was putting the son of perdition together with Israel. I'll explain. I was comparing this to Daniel, because he talks about this same beast. He talks about the beast as a statue in Daniel chapter 2, and then I think it's chapter 7 where he talks about them as beasts. So you got the head of gold representing Babylon, which is also the lion. Then you have the second kingdom with the chest and arms of silver, which is also the bear, which would be Medo-Persia. Then you have the belly and thighs of brass, which would be the leopard, which is Greece. Then you have the legs of iron, and that would correspond to the undescript beast, which would be Rome. But then in the statue, you have a mutated form of the Roman Empire with iron mixed with clay. Not so much mentioned this change in Daniel 7 that I can remember. But if we go through that and we want to look at the kings, we got to think about it a little bit here. We have Babylon, there's one. Medo-Persia, that's actually two empires, so we can actually say that's two kings, because those are two joint empires working together. So that's 3 kings. Then we have Greece, that's 4. Then we have Rome, that's 5. Then we have one is, and then we have one that's yet to come. So what would be the one is, and what would be the one to come, but only for a short space? Alright? That's the tough thing to figure out here, because it actually makes sense that the one that is to come is obviously a change of the Roman Empire. But what is the one that would be is if Rome is the 5th one there? Well, I would add that Israel is one of them, right? Because Babylon conquers Israel. So that would be the first one that has fallen, is actually Israel. So you'd have Israel, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, then the one that is becomes Rome, and then the one that is to come to continue a short space could be the mutated form where it is the Roman Empire mixed with Christianity to become Catholicism, and then it gets its power back as this beast for an hour. So you could see that it gets its kingdom for a short space, and I imagine this is for the first 3.5 years. Then we have the Antichrist actually reveal himself as God in the temple. So that is when this kingdom, this new European Union revived Roman Empire kingdom, has the Pope set up as its king, right? That's the 7th. That's just going to be continuing for a short space for the 3.5 years. Then we have an 8th that is of the 7, and he goes into perdition. That's going to be the Antichrist. About 3.5 years into this tribulation, is going to be the son of perdition. Judas gets assassinated, possessed by the devil, raised from the dead, darkened right eye, withered right arm, like we read in Zechariah, the false shepherd, the king of the Jews, the false Messiah, coming from the first kingdom. He's one of the 7. He is not at the moment, but he comes back and he is the 8th. And he's of the 7. And he goes into what? Perdition. This is the one that makes sense to me. I can't really say for sure, but that's how I'm doing it, comparing Daniel and Revelation. The only real king missing while doing that would be Israel. And you get the connection to that with this perdition, perdition, perdition. And where else does John mention perdition? Is the son of perdition Judas? And he went to his own place, the bottomless pit. You see how it all fits. So I'm going to go over it one more time, just in case you missed it. It's not clear. All right. 5 have fallen. All right. So who were they? Well, we have Israel, and they were conquered by Babylon. So there's 2. Then you have Medo-Persia. Right? Those are 2 kingdoms, Medo and Persia. Then we have Greece. That's 5. The one that is the Roman Empire at the time. One that is yet to come. This is a revived Roman Empire that is iron mixed with clay. Clay actually represents God's people. So it's going to be a mixture of the Roman Empire mixed with the Christians and with the Jews. As you can see, God refers to Israel in Jeremiah and Isaiah as clay that he can mold as he wills. And even Paul talks about that with the Christians in Romans 8, I think it might be, where he talks about molding us as clay, and he can do what he wants with the clay. That clay is called miry in Daniel chapter 2, so it's dirty. And it's mixed with the Roman Empire, and it's revived. That is the 7 that goes for a short space, the first 3.5 years. Then the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7 and goeth into perdition. The son of perdition comes up out of the bottomless pit. At this time, the short space, 3.5 years have passed, he's assassinated. Something along those lines happened. His right eye is darkened, his right arm is withered. The false shepherd from Zechariah. He's possessed with the devil's spirit now. He claims to be God in the temple. He is of the 7. He is not at the time, and he's of the 8th, claiming to be the Messiah, the King of the Jews. Part of the revived Israel. Right? And then it says here, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have not received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So we see here that at this time, when he comes up as king of the 7 heads, there's power given to 10 kings over the world, and they give all their power to one man. And the UN already is talking about this, to have one man rule, and that's going to be who it is. And I think this all fits together. And I'll try to paint the picture again when I just do a quick sum up video, trying to lay out the time frame of all of this stuff going on. Right now is just a quick summation, just kind of winging it as we go through here. So let's continue on. In verse 14 it says, These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. So you see, they're going to make war with the Lamb. I see this as the Transformers movie. You might be going, what the hell am I talking about? Well, check it out. With the Transformers movies, you have these aliens that come down. And they say that they're the good guys escaping these bad guys. And they call themselves Autobots. And they're trying to get away from these Decepticons. So they're already bad-mouthing the other ones that kicked them out. Right? These aliens that come down, calling themselves the Autobots, are the fallen angels. And they're actually pretending to be the good guys, trying to unite with the governments. Right? And they want help to fight off who? The Decepticons who kicked them out and who are coming to destroy them. Right? So they're flipping the script and making the fallen angels look like the good guys, and they're making the good guys, Jesus, that look like the bad guys. So this is how he's deceiving the world to come together to fight the Lamb, saying that he is an invading alien species, and he's come to actually help them to defeat them. It's a deception, and we're already told what the deception was through the Transformer movie. So that's why I said this is the Transformer movie. Here we go at verse 15. He says, "And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So that's why I was saying from chapter 13 about the beast that comes up out of the sea. Seems like it comes up out of a bunch of peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And that makes sense because you got the 7 heads, right? The 7 kingdoms, 7 nations, and you got what? Israel, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and you got Greece and Rome. So you got Europe and Asia and whatnot all mixed up into this. So yeah, that's where that beast comes up out of. You can notice at this time that America, not really mentioned. I think is gone. There might be people there, but there's no really established government, has no real power anymore. God's judging us because we've had such great light and great gifts, great grace, and we've squandered it, and now we're going against God, and he's just going to drop the hammer. But anyway, verse 16, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth." Now, at this time, you would think Rome, right? And even if you think Rome doesn't have power today, you're mistaken. Rome, the Vatican, is a state and a religious head. So it has both uh, a king and a high priest that are one in the Pope. And that gives them power over the whole world through 2 means. The whole world is joined together with Roman law, something you might not be familiar with. But through that law, they have control over the world. Everybody's bound to it by contract. The Vatican actually owns the City of London. The City of London is not part of England. And it owns Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, which is not part of the actual United States for America. These are different entities, like their own little country cities inside of another country, their own little city-states, like the Vatican. And they all are used for religious, financial, and military domination. And not only that, there's Catholics in every country that can pull sway over their leadership. That is why Napoleon ended up just marching into Italy and dethroning the Pope, because he had too much sway over his people. Right? He wanted to end that. Didn't want to be under the thumb of the Pope. So he did something about it. And yeah. So when you think of that, that's what naturally would think of. Now, outside of that, it's talking about a harlot. It can be connected to Jerusalem, but I don't see how Jerusalem runs the world. Maybe I'm just not really sure about that. Like I don't have the information, the knowledge to see that. It could be because everybody gets their attention to Jerusalem. It draws everybody's attention because of what's going on there, and because it's God's holy place there. But I'm sure we'll see more detail as it actually breaks that down in the very next chapter. So let's get into this. In Revelation chapter 18, I talk about Babylon is fallen. And what's interesting is that there's Catholics who will say that the Vatican is Babylon. Let's actually listen to this VaticanCatholic.com. That's actually his username on YouTube, VaticanCatholic.com, and it is a dot like a period for the end of the sentence. It's not the word or anything like that. And he's a Catholic, and he's calling out the Catholic Church for being Babylon, and talked about how they did a light show at the Vatican showing all kinds of dirty birds all over the buildings of the Vatican, and then the light show showed the hanging gardens of Babylon on the buildings. And he was saying, yeah, see how it's become the cage of every unclean and hateful bird and whatnot. So he was making that connection. He did a fairly good job of it. But it says to come out of her. So anyway, let's read this here. At verse 1 it says, "And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." Very interesting. So we got an angel coming down, and the earth is lightened by his glory. So he stands out because the world's getting pretty dark at this time. And he cries out, "Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen." This could be reference to, where is it? I don't think it's 14, maybe it is. It is 14. This angel right here. It could be reference to this angel. It seems like this might be the retelling of what this angel went out to do, and the detail of what he actually said. And yeah, we get a connection where we can see Rome, right? They've drunken off the wine and the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed a fornication with her. So they're mixing like church and state, mixing up the doctrine. But these merchants have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. This doesn't mean that they're selling her abundance of delicacies. The merchants are waxing rich because she buys them. And the Catholic Church buys a lot of stuff to build up their fancy buildings and the artwork within the buildings and their fancy clothes and their golden candles and cups and wafers and wine up the wazoo and the incense. They got to constantly buying for all the churches. They're buying stuff all the time, constantly keeping the upkeep, right? That's where all the ties are going. Well, some of it anyway. And verse 4, it says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." So we see here, it says, come out of her, and this doesn't mean just come out of her city, because it says, be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues. Her sins are the fornication, right? The wine of the wrath of her fornication. So the wine is a representing of teachings. I know the Catholic Church like to say blood. This is not her blood. The Bible makes it clear that the wine is actually teachings. You're having a communion with God when you get into the Word and eat the bread of life, which is Jesus' flesh and blood. The actual wine is the teachings, the doctrines. And the fornication is mixing those things up and corrupting the teachings of the church. And that's exactly what the Catholic Church has done. And the Catholics have been partaking of that. So when it says come out of her, it just doesn't mean the city, as in Most Catholics are not in the Vatican. They're not at Rome, right? You got to come out of her and be not partaker of her sins, that you received not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen. Sounds like the Catholic Church. And am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And I try telling this to Catholics, and they think that Jesus is going to return to protect the Catholic Church, but here we see he's going to destroy it, just like he did with Israel when they played the harlot. Look at 70 AD. He destroyed them, scattered them abroad. But Catholics have that same mindset. We're God's people. We're the chosen church. Nothing bad's ever going to happen to us, no matter what we do. And they don't realize how far they've drifted away from the word of God, just like Israel did. And then, boom. You reject the people who come and try to wake you up. That's what Israel did. Prophets were sent to them, told them to get back to the word of God, back to the Torah, and they would kill them. Same thing the Catholic Church has done. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. You see, the merchants are getting rich because they were buying merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet. That's exactly the stuff the Catholic Church buy up for their instruments, decorations, and all fine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, of brass, of iron, and marble. And then we got the incense here, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, slaves, and souls of men. And yes, the Catholic Church does buy up some military stuff, but this one's interesting. Souls of men, they do try to get that, but also that actually ties to the Social Security number, and the Catholic Church claiming to own all the souls of men. And when you get a Social Security number, you're under their jurisdiction, and they sell those things on the stock market, and depending on the worth of what you're actually providing to that Social Security number. It's a lot of crazy stuff with that. You should look into. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. The Vatican. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company in ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried, when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. I think we're told that she's made desolate because the kings of the earth get sick of her. kind of history repeating itself. They go all Napoleon on her ass and take her out. They just leave scorched earth. They make sure she's not coming back this time. You don't want another like Jason Voorhees. You think he's dead, and it's like, how does he keep coming back? No, you don't need that. So they figured annihilation. All right, verse 20 here says, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her." And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. No craftsman of whatsoever craft ye be shall be found any more in thee. The sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Wow. It's pretty harsh, right? You could see again a lot to do with the Vatican, with the musicians and the candles and the marriages. It fits to a T, the Vatican. You could try to apply some of this to other places, but this is to a city, so it's kind of like, what city? And it fits that to a T. So after this, I'll be jumping into actually the very end. Jesus comes back, and we'll read about that. This seems to be the end of the tribulation period. Next is Jesus' return. And so I'll set up those tabs. It's going to get kind of long, and these tabs are going to get a little thin. Hopefully I don't accidentally X any of them out. And if I got to jump back and forth, hopefully I can do that without messing things up. So thanks for watching. Take care and keep an eye out for the next one.